and to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank
Madam Clerk. Mr. Rega, are
Yes.
we recording video too?
you. Yes, we are. Thank you. All right. Let's go ahead, Madam Clerk, if you don't mind doing a roll call, please.
Ms. Hutto?
Yes. Here.
Mr. Haney?
Yeah, not yet.
Oh, not
Not
yet.
yet.
I'm sorry. Mr. Robichaud?
Here.
Chairman Rega?
Here?
And Mr. Stryker. He's
Mr.
still
Stryker.
on until he gets
Mr.
replaced by
Stryker.
himself.
Very good. Now, before we go to the items from the audience, I think we want to do the swearing in of Mr. Haney. Is that right?
That would be great.
Very
At
good.
this point in time, Mr.
Mr. Haney?
Come on up. You have his paperwork?
He has, there you go.
All right, good to see you. How do you do? All right, left hand on the Bible, other hand, right hand up. Repeat after me. I, John Haney,
I, John Haney,
a citizen of the state of Florida
a citizen of the state of Florida,
and of the United States of America,
and of the United States of America,
and being employed by
being employed by
or an officer of
or an officer of
the city of Parker,
the city of Parker,
and a recipient of public funds
and a recipient of public funds,
as such employee or officer,
as such employee or officer,
do hereby solemnly swear
do hereby solemnly swear
or affirm
or affirm
that I will support
that I will support
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and of the state of Florida,
and of the state of Florida,
and that I am duly qualified
and that I am duly qualified
to hold office
to hold office
under the Constitution of the state,
under the Constitution of the state,
and that I will well
and I will well
and faithfully perform
faithfully perform
the duties of Planning Commission member
the duties of planning commission member
of the city of Parker, Florida,
of the city of Parker, Florida,
on which I'm about to enter,
on which I'm about to enter,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you, John.
Hear that, Deb? We got a raise.
I know, I heard that, yeah.
Very good.
And
John?
of course, we'll have to swear Mr. Stryker next time she
Do we need to swear in the city clerk?
I'm done.
She's already done. Good deal. Very good.
Same seat, different commission.
Well, you're not next to me where you can rub my knee anymore.
Well, that's true. They moved the seat though, I think, John, to give you that one back.
Well, John, welcome. I appreciate you volunteering your time, as all of us do, on a regular basis. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a new commissioner, John Haney. He has, in the past, also been one of our council members. We're glad to have him back on the Planning Commission. He's going to be a wealth of information, local business owner, and somebody that I believe has contributed to the city in many, many ways. We also have a new clerk today, Kimberly Riga. So we welcome her to being our Madam Clerk as well. All right. At this time, we're going to go to items from the audience. If anybody would like to come up and state your name at the podium and tell us what's on your mind, we'd be happy to listen to what you have. Very good. Come on up, sir. Now, these are going to be items that are not on the agenda, so. Yes, sir.
Loud here?
Yes, sir.
My name is David Muterspaw. I've been a lifelong resident of Parker until I went to school, went away to college, and then got married. And, the way life has it, things change for us. I inherited a piece of property here in Parker from my mother a couple years ago.
May we have the address?
Pardon?
May we have the address, please?
5326 Lake Drive.
Thank you.
I grew up at 5417 Lake Drive. My parents sold it 15 years ago or so. As life would have it, things change. My brother's terminally ill, and I take care of him. And Hurricane Michael took our other house. We just received the proceeds from it, and it's just enough that I can. I'm asking for your help. I'd like to put a mobile home on that lot that I own. My plans are eventually, in the next couple of years, build there, build a permanent structure there. But as it stands right now, we're living in the Holiday Inn Express. And, I just need your help. I ask you to consider it.
Do you know what it's zoned, David? What that area is zoned as? Is it low-density residential at this time?
You know, I don't know.
Okay.
It's,
Where is it at now?
5326 Lake Drive. A little more than a block off of Tenna Parkway. South side.
I would ask that you do this. Let me just kind of give you the rules, what's going on. So, was there a mobile home there before?
Many years ago.
Okay.
It's been vacant for a very long time.
Okay. There were provisions where if there was a mobile home there before in a low-density residential area, that if the storm, for example, destroyed a mobile home, they had so much time in order to replace it. However, we've rewritten the land development rules in an effort to kind of protect the surrounding areas, not only the value of the land and everything, but there are areas very specifically designed where mobile homes can be placed. However, there are areas, for example, in a low-density residential area where they cannot be replaced unless there was one there before, and then you put a new one there sometime within 6 months after the storm. But I don't know if there are two different areas within the city. I believe it's along 98 and then SR 22. Is that right, guys? SR 22, where mobile homes can be placed. My recommendation is go ahead and take a look at where that area is. Look at what the zone is. If it's low density residential MU1, which would be multi-use 1 or multi-use 2, or even commercial. There may be a provision where it can go there, but if not, it would require a variance. We are a recommendation body here. The decisionary body is actually the executive crew, and that would be the council members. You'd have to request a variance directly from them. But I recommend you find out what it's zoned as right now, and then then they'll need a history of what was there before, and then they'll be able to make their decision there, okay? But that's really as clean as I can put it right now, just because the rules have changed a little bit in an effort to kind of help the city grow in a way that the council members have a vision of. And there are places where mobile homes can be placed, but there are places where they can't be. And usually that has, to do with if you're, for example, building a residence, or so you can park one there temporarily for the purpose of building. But generally, if you were planning on living in it, then at this time, for reasons that the council members had voted on and it's passed in the new LDRs, would be prohibited. But I don't know exactly where you're at, and I think what you'd have to do is review exactly where that area is, what was there before, because that's all prevalent too, or it's indicative of what could be if you could put the mobile home back. But thank you for, it sounds like you got a lot on your mind and a lot of things that you're doing right now, so
Thank you
thanks.
very much.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you folks. Have a great day.
Appreciate that. Anybody else? Any other items from the audience? Very good. We're going to move on then to the agenda items. First thing in the agenda today is Mr. Murhead here?
Minutes.
Oh, minutes. Thank you, sir. 1 second, sir. They're.
Get the minutes, yeah.
Let's go ahead and did everybody get a chance to? And I apologize. Everybody get a chance to review the minutes?
Yes.
Let's go ahead and need a motion.
Move unanimous consent that minutes be adopted as published. Doesn't require a second.
Very good.
Nobody objects?
That's fine. That's fine.
Mr. Haney?
Let's take a vote anyway. What the heck?
Okay.
It'll give the new clerk a.
Because Mr. Haney, Mr. Sloan, because he was not a member, should he just forego?
Yes, he can still
He
vote.
can still vote on it,
Okay.
sure.
I honestly haven't had a chance to review the minutes, right? I've been present for the previous minutes.
They're pretty much exact as we had identified it, so you can abstain from the vote. We have a quorum here.
I'd appreciate that.
Oh, no? Is that
Not
right?
without
Okay.
the financial.
Don't you wish you took the unanimous consent?
That's fine, John.
You want to delay it
until the end of the
meeting and
meeting,
allow Mr.
give you a
Haney
chance
to-
to kind of
You
review
can always
the
take it up
minutes.
at the next meeting.
Yeah,
Or
we
the
can-
next
Defer it to
meeting,
the
that
next
would be
meeting.
fine. That would be fine.
I will add the minutes to the next meeting.
Very good, thank you. All right, Mr. Murhead, come on up if you don't mind, sir. Tell us a little bit about what your project is.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes.
may be able to save us some time here, I have a question for the commission.
Sure.
Mr. Muirhead seeking relief from a specific provision in the LDR under section 5-10.9,
Right.
which applies to subdivisions. His particular project is at 2 lots, which doesn't qualify it as a subdivision. His specific paragraph he's seeking relief from is the final floor elevation section, which is for properties located outside of floodplain. Keeping in mind, he's not in a subdivision, he is in flood zone AE, but his site plan shows he's just outside the AE boundary. So my question is, does this requirement even apply in his case?
I believe it does. Here's why. He's actually got the property he's on has 3 different zones, including AE and X. The structure that he's gonna build would be entirely in X, is that correct?
Correct.
Everything above X. And an engineer has reviewed it and identified that it's outside of the 100-year floodplain.
I understand that, but he is not in a subdivision, and this particular paragraph applies to subdivisions.
The one regarding the 1 foot above the road?
It's the only place it appears in the LDR. It's
Very
in
good.
one place and one place only, it's
So-
in that
So
section.
you're suggesting that as long as he is in an environment where this could be good news, essentially, Mr. Murhead, what I think you're getting at, is as long as he's gonna build properly above the elevation, it doesn't have to be 1 foot above the road because of the slope, the extreme slope that he's on.
What I'm actually saying is through oversight, I believe, this does not apply to him. I think the FFE requirement should actually apply globally, but it doesn't. Right now, it does not. He doesn't have a subdivision, that's the only thing it applies to, so I don't think we have any written guidance that we can rely on that says he has to do this.
Well, Mr. Robichaud, that is in the subdivision section. However, there are other provisions within the land development regulations about stormwater issues.
That's true.
And those would apply because when the gentleman is looking to build at a different elevation than others,
Right.
we potentially could have stormwater issues. I don't see where it's even been reviewed by our engineer, which probably should have occurred before it even came to you all.
I was gonna ask that question as well.
So I would suggest first you all consider listening to the gentleman, hearing what he has to say, but the city engineer should review what it is he's attempting to do and bring back that before you all make a recommendation to the council.
I didn't follow that last part. So
In other words.
we listened to him and,
In other words, I don't believe it's right for you to make a decision without the city engineer reviewing what he has submitted and determining whether or not it will have an effect on the stormwater, which is a big issue of the city.
I understand, but is there any point in going any further at this point?
Well, that's what I'm saying. If he wanted to present something, that's fine, but I just don't recommend that it's right for you guys on the planning commission to make a decision without the city engineer at least reviewing it.
I'm gonna make an assumption quickly, that their engineer, his engineer, has actually written pretty extensively about what the development is. So I agree with Mr. Sloan. I think we should listen to what Mr. Murhead has to say. At the very least, that way if he has to come before us, we'll already be aware of what he's going to say and then get all the detail out. He is in kind of a unique situation in that there's 23.5 feet of elevation change between the road and, the watershed area where all this water is gonna go down to. So in that style development, there is precedent within section J105 through J111 in the Florida Building Codes, which allow this kind of a development to take place without the 1 foot above the road because of the unique extreme slope that he's dealing with. So I think we listen to what he has to say,
Okay.
and then in general, there are about 5 or 6 things that the Florida Building Code is really interested in. Obviously, flooding. Second one would be, what's he going to do with the sewage if he is below the road and the
Okay, all right.
drain? I'm
But
just-
he is seeking relief from our LDR, not from the Florida Building Code.
Yes, except Florida Building Code is sort of like the supreme.
We're not empowered
Yeah.
to say one way or the other when it comes to Florida Building
I
Code.
think
That's
we-
out of our wheelhouse.
I think we should listen to what he
Well,
has to
I agree.
say.
Let's listen to him.
Very good. Mr. Murhead, tell us what you got.
Thank you. So, as I've presented to you, I have a couple lots on South Lakewood Drive, 4819 and 4821, that I am planning to build a house on each lot. And obviously the problem is that the neighboring houses on either side of the two lots, the two lots are, as you can see on the stuff I submitted, are side by side. So on either side of those, the houses are not 1 foot above the crown of the road. They're pretty much built on the natural grade that is existing. And my concern is that if I have to bring these lots up 1 foot above the crown of the road, I'm gonna be probably 6 feet above the neighboring houses, which, as you can imagine, that's gonna cause some issues, you know, in a storm water situation, you know, causing problems with the neighboring houses. My plan is to, obviously I'm gonna bring, you know, the pads up some, as outlined in the engineered letter, to help with, you know, stormwater drainage away from the houses so that it can't naturally flow to Martin Lake. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell, is not, you know, causing problems with the neighboring houses.
And KB Engineering's already the one that reviewed it and identified that you'd have plenty of stormwater runoff, and
Yes,
they
sir.
looked at the soil content and the P values and the R values. And actually, once again, you would be entirely in the X area, so you wouldn't be building in any of the AE area
Correct.
of the property. Very good. And yeah. And both properties look remarkably similar. It looks like the crown of the road is right at about 27.5 feet. And then you would still build the property above, because the primary concern that they have is for flooding of the property, sewage, and then also the big thing is any drainage alterations can't cross. You can't send any stormwater to your neighbors, and that's the big concern, and that's actually within our comprehensive plan. There's a section within our comprehensive plan, and I'm missing, it's 314, that talks about ultimately protecting those established neighbors that are there. So actually, by doing this, by not building, bringing in 6 or 8 feet of dirt to elevate that home, which you'd have as a more natural flow as it is right now. Then, of course, there's erosion control concerns. There's a lot of different ways that you can handle that. But I'm gonna go with Mr. Sloan's thoughts. Any reason why? We just got a new city clerk, so it's very likely that the reason that this didn't go to the city engineer for their review is just because we were in transition. But the information that we were given looks like it's pretty straightforward in terms of what would be required. I would suggest that we go ahead and migrate this to the city engineer, have them review it to see if there are any issues. They also compare it against all of the LDRs that we have, and then also recognize that there may be, you know, that this variance request is appropriate based on the comp plan, and also what Mr. Robichaud had brought up regarding, you know, subdivision versus non-subdivision. But I think it's a good idea for us to get their opinions as well. I've reviewed the plan. I've reviewed it against the Florida building codes, reviewed both pieces of property, and like I say, as long as you're not going to, the Florida building codes and our own requirements are that whatever you do in the grading, that no additional stormwater goes to your neighbors. So as long as it's built in such a way that it meets that requirement, I think that would be positive. could you take that next step, have it go to,
Well,
what
the
is that?
city would refer it to.
So,
it
will
should-
we take this information? What additional information
the
is
clerk-
required? then?
My suggestion is the clerk would send that over to the city engineer.
Very good.
And let the city engineer review it. Given the uncertainty of how the city staff has reviewed it, you might also provide a copy, Madam Clerk, to the utilities director and get his comments on it also.
Very good. They've already looked at contour maps. They've already, it's already gone before. They've reviewed it to the FEMA guidelines. They've looked at their base flood elevations, acknowledged those, and clearly do show that the development would be in an X area, so it would be above any kind of a flood zone that would be there. Matter of fact, I think only 6% of the property's in AE. Is that right? The majority
no,
of it.
It's more like half.
It's about half.
I got you. Percent, okay. Yeah, okay, so you would include the part that would be subjected to, wave action and things. Okay, I get it. But everything would be built, all the development would be in the X contour, right? Very good.
Yep, and I have a site plan there that kind of shows that. Obviously, surveys done to prove that it's in.
If you have other documentation besides what you submitted to the city, I would suggest you go ahead and get it to the city clerk so she can give that to the city engineer also.
Very good. Let's take that as our next step. Even though I know your engineer is very favorable towards it, it's not a bad idea for us to have our city engineers review it against all of the other rules that are there. But I think that that would be an appropriate next step. And I think-
Mr. Chairman, I have some additional
Sure, please.
issues. I agree that the engineer did address the FEMA 100-year flood plan and the base flood elevations. However, if he's got to adhere to the FFE, the final floor elevation, that's specific to properties not in floodplains, and it's not to overcome a rising water from a storm event. It's designed to overcome sheet flow from a street. The flow from the street will go downhill and it will impinge on the front of the property. The statement about 100% of the water that hits the front line of that property is going to end up in Lake Martin. He's not going to store any of it. It's all going to end up there. It's a flood damage prevention measure. Okay, do you agree with that?
Yes.
Then if it is, it fails variance test 6. And it is not consistent with the LDR in that we are not allowed to variances that supersede or abrogate conditions associated with flood damage. That's right there in the first paragraph. It also fails variance test 1 because the claimed hardship is of an economic nature. The petitioner claims that grading will not support the elevated FFE. It is a hardship. I don't disagree with that, but he fails to consider that there are more ways to achieve that FFE than grade and fill. There are many other construction techniques in the building code that are permitted that would address that, such
Like
as
piers and things.
pilings, grades, grade beams, piers and pilings, etc. They would all get to the FFE, and in many cases, the water would just flow underneath the structure. It wouldn't be altered at all. He fails to consider that, and if it's because of an economic reason, then it fails variance test 1. It also fails variance test 2 because the hardship was a result of an action by the owner. He purchased the property with an existing challenge to development. In this case, it was the difficulty in achieving the required FFE via his desired grade and fill method. It's been found by the Florida courts that an affirmative act by the owner thus constitutes a self-created hardship, which precludes granting a variance. So he's got three variance tests that I think he does not meet. I'll be happy to provide you a copy of this, Mr. Morgan. And I mean, I'd like you just to know where I'm thinking here, and I'll get a copy to all of the other council members as well.
Your finished floor level would be above grade though, right?
Correct.
So the only thing you'd be concerned with is damming, and damming in the Florida code, if you can show that you have a 2% slope away from the property, and that it's still going in the same direction, and you're not placing any of it into your neighbors. There you go.
We're still granting a variance for a flood control measure,
Yeah.
which is prohibited
Let's-
by the LDR.
Let's go ahead and take that next step. Let's have you have Anchor Engineering review it. Let's get their thoughts on it, and then we'll take another look at it. Your engineer looked pretty comfortable that they could shed all of the water keep it on the property, not infringe on any of your neighbors' properties or any adjoining properties or parcels. And that in fact, by putting in additional fill there, that it might actually confound the neighbors. It may actually cause a problem for them. I read their notes on that. So let's have our engineer review it, because that's probably a good next step, and then we'll take another look at it if that's all right with you.
Okay.
All right,
So
sir.
y'all will, do I need to do that, or is it?
I think
No,
can you get this to Anchor Engineering then? They may reach out for you, Mr. Murhead, and
Okay.
ask for additional information. But we rely heavily on the city's engineer as a secondary opinion. So if you don't mind,
Can he drop the documents, those additional documents? I'd like to submit it all at the same time.
yeah, can you get to our city clerk a fresh set of documents with
Anything new, different?
Well, any additional documents that certainly that are not in the packet.
Yeah.
I'm just.
and then won't the engineer reach out to them directly if there's something
I
that
would
they need
suspect the
additionally?
engineer, if she has questions, will probably contact his engineer
Yeah.
for additional clarification. Mr. Muirhead, if you could get those additional documents to the city clerk by close of business Thursday, can you do that?
Yes, sir.
So that she can then send it off to the city engineer.
Okay.
And KB Engineering probably is already familiar with Anchor Engineering. They probably know each other, so that should be relatively straightforward.
Yeah.
All right, sir.
Okay.
Thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
time.
I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
All right. All right, the next one on the docket here is, let's see, Mr. Reed, can you start by telling us a little bit about what your project is all about and what you'd like to accomplish, sir?
We're looking to build some condos on Fifth Avenue.
Mhm.
Mr. Hurley, I purchased the property from him about 5 years ago. He previously had planned on building condos on two properties. I'm looking to basically fulfill doing that. He was previously approved for 22 units. By combining the two properties into one, I'm looking to switch from MU1 to MU2 to be able to do 37 units.
We may have a couple of questions here, if we might. Are you're familiar with the property and what they're trying to do there? It looks to me like you've got, let me get to my drawings here. It looks to me like you've got two parcels of land that, if combined, on one side of Pitts Avenue would be 0.9 acres, is that right? Looks like one would be 21,534 square feet, and the other one looks like it'd be about a little over 20,000 square feet, is that right? Then you've got,
Combining the four of them together is 1.5 acres essentially. They were all combined when I purchased the property. I actually had to file something that's divided.
they're considered a single ownership parcel, but they're not a contiguous parcel.
I don't think you can count the stuff that's there by the water.
Previously you guys approved it as one parcel for 22 units.
It is, well, I get the 22 units because as the .9, if it was migrated to a MU2, you could do 22 units. But if you combine the two parcels of land, you've got about 0.9 acres there. And the Florida building codes do specifically use the term contiguous acreage for determining the size of a building based on acreage that is combined. When you have a roadway, you have a separation. So it's a single parcel of land, but it's a separated parcel of land. And I think in your case, you're looking for 37 units on 0.9 acres of land, then you have a roadway, then you've got about another half acre of land, roughly. actually a little bit more than a half acre of land. Mr. Sloan, am I accurate in what I'm saying here?
I believe you are accurate, Mr. Chair. I do want to ask the gentleman a question. When you say it was already approved for 22 dwelling units,
Under the current.
do you have the paperwork where it was approved? Because it's not in the packet here.
Miss Hurley probably has, I have like, architectural rendering from Mr. Hurley, Jan might have it, but it.
Do you know when the city council approved it?
Oh, it was like probably about 15 years ago.
Okay.
Our
I mean, it
LDR's
was a long
changed,
time ago,
yeah.
but I mean, at that time, they approved it all as one parcel.
Okay, well, the reason I asked the question is because if the city council approved a change of land use already,
They did not.
then I need to see that. If they didn't approve the change of land use, and as Mr. Rega said, we're looking at two separate contiguous parcels on one side of the street and I guess two on the other side of the street, I think the code is not going to allow you to combine those two to come up with a total of the entire parcel without vacating the road, which would be in the middle, which I don't know if the council would be inclined to do that or not.
I don't think the people that live on Pitts would appreciate that.
Yeah. So first I would ask if you could get the approval that you're speaking of. That would be helpful for us in our research. The second issue is, if I see you're represented by Mr. Seifert, if he could provide me with some authority that says you can do what you're trying to do, to combine parcels on both sides of the street to then allow for a mixed use two of 30, however many units you're trying to do.
They're already combined, but they're combined, if you're looking at the map, one of the properties, like, they're across the street from each other, but that's one parcel, and then the other one, they just were divided in two, they're not divided
All right,
down the
well,
road.
we have two maps here, and I have one that says 1 and 2, which I'm assuming those are combined.
No, they're not. Those are separate properties
Okay.
with separate owners.
They have riparian
So which
rights to the
parcels,
water.
Mr. Robichaux, if you're aware, which parcels is he trying to combine?
Well, what they're trying to, here's the land use, this appraiser's map. They're trying to combine these two parcels, but they want to include these two parcels that are
Right.
on the water side of Pitts Avenue.
But I don't think you can use that as your count
The
for
the
your square
problem is-
footage for
That's
what
what
you're
I-
building on.
The problem I see it is those two parcels are not owned by one individual or one entity. They're owned by two separate
Well,
entities.
I think Mr. Reed's talking about buying the
I
other
have that
two.
under contract already.
Right.
with Miss Hurley, and
So
that's why the application.
so assuming that they'd all be under the same ownership, I'm looking at, based on that, these two parcels here on this side of the street, these two and these two, correct?
Can I?
Yes, sure.
It's
Come and-
one
come and help
one
me
is
out.
what it is.
So this is one parcel, and then this is the second parcel, and we're trying to.
Because they
combine
have
those two.
water rights
Okay,
across the street.
so you're saying this is one entire parcel here, and this is the second parcel?
Correct. There's an existing residence here, and then Mr. Hurley
I
had
don't think you
permitting
can
and
count
was
the
building
stuff
something
on
over
the
here.
damn road.
Our plan is to build condos over here and the clubhouse across the street where that previously were building over there.
Okay, and how are these depicted on the land use map?
They're
They're
MU1.
MU1.
They're MU1.
They're both MU1.
They abut, but
So
are
they
not
were-
in the,
My understanding is that they were previously approved for 22 units based off of 1.5 acres at 15 units per acre.
Okay,
Yeah,
now,
but
help me out here.
15 years
Does
ago.
this parcel have the same parcel
Yes.
number as that parcel?
Correct. And the whole
Not-
entire thing was one parcel when I bought it, but I had to have it separated 5 years ago, and then we're just recombining them.
Okay.
no, they're different parcels. They're different parcels on the appraiser's map.
Okay.
These two are, but not these two, right? Or no?
Well, no, they're just as you say, yeah. this is,
This is,
trying to get her oriented here.
this is one parcel here,
Yeah.
and then
This is one parcel with one owner, and this is a separate parcel. This, Mr. Hurley, Ms. Hurley owns this parcel, and you're the, owner of record for this parcel.
Correct.
So no one entity owns both parcels.
Not yet.
Not yet.
I have this parcel under contract with Miss Hurley, that's why her name's on the application as well.
She doesn't own that parcel, you do.
No, Miss Hurley owns this parcel, I own this.
Oh, you're trying to buy Miss Hurley's parcel.
I have Miss Hurley's parcel under contract, that her name's on the application right now because me and her are the two owners.
Okay, and just to clarify, this entire piece and this parcel and this parcel have the same taxpayer, not taxpayer, but property
No.
number?
Because I only pay taxes on one property.
So the one to the north is, last digits are 0100000, and, the one below it is 10.
You're missing
You-
what I'm saying. I'm asking about this piece and this piece.
Oh, yeah, they're one-
And this
they're-
piece and that piece.
Yeah, they're all the same parcel. They are,
Okay.
they are on the appraiser's map. They are the same parcel number.
Okay, well, I understand that we may have an issue there on the roadway. I would like to look at that before you all
Make a decision.
make a decision.
The hitch and the
We
get
also
along
have
had-
to publish and we have to
Yeah.
have an ordinance.
Yeah,
My
because,
question-
please, Beth.
I mean, if we've got 37 condos, we're looking at 1.5 parking spots. So now you have to have 53 parking spots to go with 37 condos sitting in that little tiny area. Do we have plans for that? I'd like to see
Yes, ma'am.
something.
So it's going to be elevated, so the first floor is gonna be an elevator, and the first floor is gonna be all parking underneath the structure as well. We'll be able to put it like about 70.
So then it's gonna be 3 stories? 4
It's going to be
stories?
6 stories.
Oh,
The code, you guys' code lets up to 60 something feet, I believe. I think it's a little bit more than that.
MU2, I think it's up to 12.
Yeah.
Yeah, MU2's up to 12. Mr. Sloan's gonna have to review it, because like I say, the Florida Building Code specifically used the term contiguous parcel of land. And my concern is that you've got a roadway separating the two, and they do dictate that if you've got a separated parcel of land, when you're looking at volume, you can't separate that and combine them. Otherwise, if you own a parcel of land, here and then, a mile away, and ultimately, that would be essentially the same thing. That's why they use the word contiguous in the description for determining the volume of dwelling units that can actually go into that one area. So, but Mr. Sloan is, he's the legal guy, and we're gonna request
So-
that he review that to see if it meets that requirement.
As one tax ID, wouldn't it be considered a contiguous property with a?
It's contiguous, the
Not
definition
from a
of
development
contiguous, right,
standpoint.
yeah.
there's a
Definition of
road that goes
contiguous
through
is
there
that they
that those
actually.
residents have to drive down.
I'm not trying to do anything. with
I'm
that.
just saying.
Yeah.
So, that road is a bit of the math here, so.
So,
And there's already a lot of traffic down there. You're absolutely correct.
Did I understand 4 stories?
6.
Six stories, yeah.
Mr. Reed, while I've got you up here, this is your application. Is that a mistake?
Yeah.
That should be Ms. Hurley?
Yeah, it should be this way.
Okay, thank you.
Apologize.
Yeah, no worries.
will you let Mr. Seifert know that I'll be touching base with him?
Very good.
So the question that they were looking for is to get it moved from MU1 to MU2.
Right.
That was what was tonight.
Yes, this is.
Well, it couldn't be considered tonight for final recommendation because there's no ordinance, there's been no publication of a public hearing. So that would have to be done as a part of the process. And if you'll recall, when you all do make a final recommendation, then the ordinance is a part of that recommendation. So none of that's been done yet at
Right.
this point in time,
Right.
waiting to have a presentation and figure out what the issues were. And then once we know what the concerns are of the planning commission, then I can do the research and
Should we
talk to
not
Mr.
get
Seifert.
planning commission consensus before we go to the trouble of crafting an ordinance to actually make the land use change?
Well, he's filed an application, so
Right.
your
You're saying-
consensus, the consensus is whether or not to recommend it ultimately
And
to
when
the
is,
council.
that's where I'm going. When does that happen? Before after the ordinance is published? Or,
Well, after there's a notice of public hearing.
okay,
We have not had a notice published of public hearing.
okay, so we should wait for that before we make our recommendation to the
Correct.
city council.
And by then, I will have an update on the issue of the roadway separation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, my curiosity is, wouldn't the fire department have a concern about 6 stories and
Yeah, we don't exactly have
sewage?
something to get all the way up there, do we?
That's,
Do you-
I don't think there's a water supply, a big enough main to.
Couldn't tell ya.
Enough sewage to-
There's a lot of things that they could do. I mean,
Right.
if for some reason, John, they could put standpipes in, so that firemen aren't running up 6 stories. But in fact, MU1 and MU2 could actually go up to 12 stories, providing the engineers say the soil content could carry it. My concern is like I say, the Florida building codes are pretty clear in this subject. It has to be contiguous property. And it specifically uses the term, it can't be separated by a roadway. Now, I didn't read and once I hit that, it was sort of a stopgap, and that's why I thought I would ask the questions here. So I'm gonna leave that up to Mr. Sloan to review. But Mr. Reed could, in fact, on that piece of property, if it pans out, he could go up to 12 stories with it. Again, as
Or
long as the engineers say
120
they could.
feet. I
Or
think-
120 feet, that's exactly right.
I do want to clarify one thing, Mr. Chair. If you'll remember, the council did pass an amendment to that fire suppression provision. So anything above 2 stories does require
Standpipes.
standpipes.
Yeah. So that was in response to your concern, Bev, and that is that.
A ladder truck, Mr. Riga, to
Yeah.
get people off the 6th floor.
Heck, yeah.
Unless we're gonna give them parachutes.
Okay.
Yeah, it makes
Well, let
sense.
me do the research and let me work with Mr. Seifert and see what he has to say, and then I'll bring it back to you all.
Yeah, very good. And then at that time, I guess we'll take the steps of, I mean, if it passes that muster, then we go on to deciding whether or not we could go from MU1 to MU2, right, after a public.
Well, and Mr. Robichaux's point of you all essentially deciding what your recommendation is gonna be, and then at that point, me waiting for you to make that decision before the ordinance is done? Is that what you're suggesting?
I would suggest that might be a more efficient way to do things, rather than.
Well, except the ordinance is referenced in the public notice.
Okay, so what would be the downside of us having our normal discussions and deliberations and coming up with a recommendation?
Well,
And then if the recommendation thumbs down, then it dies
the
there.
only thing would be, the historical precedent is the planning commission has a noticed public hearing.
Okay,
And that is published in the newspaper or
Right.
on the county website.
right.
And so that notice historically has had a header that would deal with what this
Okay,
gentleman
I
is
see- I
proposing
see.
to do.
Well, the actual wording of the
Of the
ordinance.
ordinance, that's correct. But I understand your concern. I can bring back the information to y'all, and then y'all can decide if you want to move forward with the public hearing at that point in time.
Well, so,
I was understanding going from M1-2 to M1, or from MU1 to M1-2 to U2 was a lot quicker and didn't require a formal variance and everything else.
It's not a variance, you're changing a land use category. It's the same process as going from residential to commercial, from residential to mixed-use 1. The process is the same. It just takes an ordinance, takes a couple of public hearings, and those things have not come to fruition yet. So it doesn't. So the point of my story is simply to say MU1 to MU2 is no different than MU1 to commercial or residential to commercial. It all has to follow the same process.
Okay.
Good.
Very good.
Ah.
So we have a few more steps, Mr. Reed. Thank you.
So, question, can I ask a question? When the public is speak to residents.
They're actually, that's what Mr. Sloan was just talking about. Part of that process would be a public hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah, today we really just got a first indication of what's going on
Only
there.
Pittsburgh can handle 22 months less.
Yeah, no, there's a couple of hurdles that we need to get through before we move on to the public hearing.
And I would also ask that, as is historical, that this be referred to the engineer for their review and to city staff, because as you point out, there could be particularly utility issues.
Well, there is no development plan. All they have is a notional site plan. Or all they have in the package is a notional site plan. There's nothing anywhere near the detail that the engineers would need to make a meaningful evaluation.
Yeah, today he was really just looking for that MU1 to MU2 to give him the capacity, but there are other capacity issues there, so.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
it's not.
Yes, sir. All right, very good. Okay.
So what's the next step?
I'm gonna bring back the information and I'll talk with you all about it.
Okay. Um,
We do appreciate y'all coming out if you're Pitts residents.
Yeah.
I mean, Mr. Chair, you might take comments from the public since
Sure.
they're here.
Yeah.
But the official public hearing would occur once it's publicized.
Very good. Well, our attorney has just said that we can certainly listen to what you have to say at this time. If anybody would like to come and voice your opinion about this particular project, feel free to come up to the podium and give your name and your address. Give us your concerns.
You got all that?
Oh, you brought the long-winded one,
My
huh?
biggest concern. I
Let-
live
name-
at
name and
934
address,
Pitts
sir.
Road, Marion Odom, 934 Pitts Avenue, which is basically directly across from where he's proposing to do all this.
Yeah.
And from my understanding, after Hurricane Michael, I thought it was, nobody could build on the water side anymore. If you're not there, you're not building on that side.
I don't, that's certainly not in our land development rules.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm not sure about that.
so unless it was grandfathered in.
I-
Not if there's nothing on it, there'd be,
It's
You know.
just another vacant lot.
it's just a vacant lot right now.
Yeah, as long as it meets the requirements of the DEP, FEMA, and all of the requirements are met from a building code standpoint. There's nothing that we've done in the LDRs that would change you from
Okay.
building on a waterfront
And
lot.
then the next thing is the water retention across the road. Where's all that stormwater gonna go?
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because there's a little bit of the prior development we were talking about. Our rules within the LDRs, as well as the Florida building codes, prevent any new development from occurring that would harm the neighbors. As a matter of fact, the engineers have to sign off that no additional stormwater would make it, based on a new development, would make it into adjoining properties. That's an absolute must in our LDRs and the Florida building codes.
Because right now, when it rains as hard as it's rained sometimes, that's a waterfall down Pittsburgh.
One of the things that the engineers do is they look at the soil that's there, they look at something called R values and P values, which are based on what that soil is, its ability to run off and go. That's somewhat of a watershed area, a water basin area. All of that would be in consideration. But like I say, there's a number of other hurdles that would have to be overcome before this project could,
Just
even
one
get off the
last
ground.
thing, Pitts
Sure.
Road is already an issue with traffic,
Yeah,
big time. We've been here to
Yeah.
try to get speed humps
Yeah.
because people flying down that road.
no, yes, sir.
If we had, how many cars? 50-something cars.
Yeah.
There's gonna be a bigger issue.
There is a requirement for a development like this that makes them, it's necessary for whatever structures, they have to prove that they're not gonna harm their neighbors in a variety of different ways,
I think
including,
that's my biggest concern, cause I work in construction work, and we have developments turned down because we don't have enough size for a retention pond.
my biggest concern was, it looks like they may not have enough land to do what they're doing. I mean, there are all kinds of other rules that they would have to abide by. not only meet all of the engineering requirements, but in that area, even if it went to MU2, they can't have more than 80% impervious lot coverage. And that has to do with stormwater and runoff. And if you look, are you able to get online at all?
Yeah.
Go to chapter 9 of the LDRs. There's an area there called concurrence. The city has to, concurrence laws are all about making sure that the infrastructure is there before a structure can be built. It's everything from stormwater to sewage to water. As a city, we have to guarantee that we could provide every resident with 106 gallons of potable water every day at 50 PSI and take away 100 gallons of sewage water. So if a development like that would require that they would have to put in new storm, sewage, and water lines, it would be on their developer to do that so that the adjoining residences were not harmed by the new development.
Right, it was hard enough going through Mike, much less.
We, most of us lived through that, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you for your comments,
Thank you.
appreciate you. Would anybody else like to come up and tell me, please?
Terry Davis, I live at 937 Pitts Avenue.
Hey, Terry.
The place that they're talking about, I'm under contract with them still.
Mm.
With lease with the option to purchase by October 1st, and we're still,
August.
where litigation is right now. We plan to close before, September, I guess, September. And so, I don't know how he's even trying to assume that he's already gonna build. I have contracts already with him, so.
I'm sorry, you have a contract for the same property to purchase
So-
the property that he
Yes,
says
sir.
he has a contract for?
He owns the property and it's owner financing, and I have the lease with the option to purchase. It's all written in.
Okay,
Yeah,
can
so-
you provide a copy to the clerk
I can.
of your documentation?
Very good.
And we're in litigation right now with Mr. Seifert and my attorney, so it's already in the circuit court right
All right, who is your attorney?
now. Steve, well, I can give you the information.
All right,
I
if
have
you'll
it.
give that to the clerk, when you give her the documentation.
Yes, sir. No problem.
Thanks for that input, sir, I appreciate you. Thank you. Would anybody else like to voice their opinion? Okay, very good. Well, thanks for everybody's concern.
Are we gonna go
Jim,
around the
yeah,
room?
please.
Well, let's, Bev, you first.
What do you-
Ladies
Well,
first.
So, number one, I think 6 feet is ridiculous, or 6 stories is ridiculous. We don't have a ladder truck. I mean, I think we can get to 3 floors, maybe if we push our luck. Other than that, unless we're inhabiting flying squirrels on the top 3, I don't know how they're gonna get down.
Yeah.
The Pitts Road has always been rough down through there. They've had speeding issues. The gentleman that lives in that really pretty white house that looked like a log cabin, he even did some curb stuff to run the water down and away. I don't know what his building capabilities are, but in my head, when I envision it, I don't know. And the whole going from MU1 to MU2 to have 37 apartments or condos, and then on top of it, you know, an extra 50 some odd cars down through there. You know, the people that live down there, that is a nice kind of quiet little area. They're in there really, really tight. And I just cannot imagine that on top of it.
All of that is MU1 at this time, is that
Yeah.
right? Yeah, MU1.
Yeah.
And I think it kisses a little bit of commercial property there on the northeast end.
No, it's surrounded by, it's surrounded by MU1, it abuts, it's in the CRA, but it's not in sub-area 1.
No.
It abuts.
Is this it right here, Jim? These 4 right here?
There's 2 little properties.
Yeah, that's commercial right there.
And I
So
don't
just
think
a-
that you
well,
should
just
be able to
this is
count your
commercial.
water property that's across the street for your
Yeah, just-
acreage.
Thank you.
Where are you gonna put that out there?
It's hard for me to take notes when multiple people.
We're floated out there. Yeah.
Bev, anything else?
No, they were just saying that there was a proposed marina and gym and other stuff
That's
to
true.
go on the other side. Really?
Yeah.
Where?
Yeah, on the water side.
Where?
On the water side.
Okay.
Yeah, on the water side, is what they were looking at. Jim, your thoughts, please?
Yes, and it's exactly on that subject. We don't have a development plan in front of us.
Right.
anything that's presented to us in this package that's not assigned and sealed by an engineer or an architect development plan is not enforceable.
Yeah.
He doesn't have, the owner does not have to follow anything he submits as vis-a-vis a development plan.
Right.
They can take that and wad it up, throw it in the trash, come up with a completely different development plan for a completely different business.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a condo, although that's where the money is. And they're not held, they would get a land use change, and they could do anything with the land they
Within
wanted
that
within the
MU2?
limits of allowable use for MU1 or 2 if they get it.
Yep.
They don't even have to develop it, they can turn around and sell it, and guess what transfers with the sale?
The land
The
use.
land use.
Yes, yeah.
So to me, that's a shiny object being waved in front of us. That's all that is, and we should be smart enough to not fall for it. If we want to make a development plan contingent, signed and sealed
Right.
development plan contingent on a land use change, that's one thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can legally do that.
Right.
But if we just give them a naked land use change, we
With
have
a
no
promise.
cards
No.
left in our wallet. I mean,
Yeah.
Well, what you may want to consider is a development agreement which binds the developer to certain things if the city does certain things. And that development agreement, there's a statutory procedure for that also requires a public hearing.
but couldn't that development agreement pin them down to you've got to build condos and it's got to be no more than this many units?
I believe it could.
Okay, all right, well,
I
that's,
believe it could.
Yeah.
that's an alternate path,
When
maybe a
we-
good path.
When we all rewrote the LDRs last year, that was a very specific component that I think Mr. Sloan brought up, that many cities in fact enter into agreements with those would-be developers so that that plan must be adhered to.
Yeah.
It's a contract with that developer.
Correct.
Yeah, we probably should have done that with the lumberyard.
Yeah.
But 2020 hindsight. Some additional comments for everybody to consider. The specifics are the parcels in the CRA bordering on but not within sub-area 1. All the other surrounding parcels are MU1. There are 22 other waterfront parcels on Pitts Avenue. All of them are classified as single family by the appraiser's website. The nearest MU2 parcel
Yeah.
is 2.3 road miles away at Parkway Gardens, the demolished Parkway Gardens site. So they would be an island MU2 site. Not
I think there's a
that
bunch of
anything-
townhomes in there, right as you pull into Pitts Avenue, there's a bunch of
But-
townhomes
They're-
right there.
It's all MU2 and it's
But
all,
those are-
every bit of
Those are
that
all
is residential.
MU1, and they're
MU1.
all single-family
MU1.
dwellings.
It's all MU1, but it's all residential
Yeah.
on the appraiser's
Yeah.
website. None of it's
Yeah.
multifamily. There are
Yeah,
2 multifamily plats across the street. They're not waterfront, though.
yeah.
But everything else is single-family
Well,
residential.
those are all good, important things.
I'm not done yet.
No. I don't anticipate you would be.
But wait, there's
The
more.
justifications, I thought the justifications were particularly thin. Mr. Seifert cited the beauty of the property, okay? Limited availability of quality housing in Parker, yes, we have that. A lack of MU2 properties in an area that the additional units possible with a change to MU2. So he doesn't have any other MU2 property, so if he changed to MU2, it would fit into the same building footprint. I don't see that as a benefit. Providing a development plan and prove, I'd already covered that he can run with the goods. Talking about traffic. If developed within MU1 density limits, the number of household equivalents, and that's defined in a couple of places, but it's basically individual utility connections, individual households,
Right.
for lack of a better term. Household equivalents in this section of Pitts Avenue would increase from 22 to 37. That's a 68% increase, with a commensurate increase in resident traffic. Pitts Avenue on-street parking and on-street parking is now both limited and at capacity, especially in the evening. There would be potentially additional on-street parking loads due to the overflow from the condo because they never really have enough parking space, and likely additional parking loads due to visitors to the condo. Granting MU2, if we grant MU2 and the development under these density limits occurs, that would increase the household equivalents from 22 to 47, which is a 114% increase in traffic and on-street parking loads. And I already mentioned the island effect. Basically, I don't see any compelling public benefit to support a land use change. Now, they're perfectly within their rights to try to develop property under MU1 with the prevailing restrictions that exist, and there's, you know, they would still have to pass muster with a development plan, and they would still be subject to neighborhood impact statements and that sort of thing. But I don't see any way we could well, I'll stop
No
right there.
benefit.
I'll stop right there.
That's okay. John, you're probably right about now wondering, what the heck did I get into?
Going home, boss. Going home.
Any thoughts about what we just heard?
I got a lot of thoughts, but I'm gonna keep my green mouth shut for right now.
I don't blame you. Now, one thing I would tell you, and this is neither here nor there, but if they did go to MU2 just for those two parcels of land, remember, when you've got separation, you have different performance standards there. Those performance standards would require visual buffers, fencing. They would have to completely shield the parking lot from the rest of the MU1. Those are all what we all wrote in the new land development rules. Obviously, there are noise concerns. There are all different kinds of things that they would have to do, because that little cutout going from MU1 to MU2 would separate a land, different zones. So they would have to abide by every one of those performance standards, which included fencing, foliage, downward lighting, everything to not interfere with the local neighbors. My biggest concern is, do we depart from what the state has said? And Mr. Sloan's going to be the expert on this, but I believe the state would not combine those parcels of land for volume, for dwelling unit volumes. That's what I read, and but he's the legal scholar, so I'm going to wait to hear back from Mr. Sloan to see.
Would the state even get to vote? I mean, it's a local matter, isn't it?
Well, I'm just saying that
definition.
I oftentimes review the Florida building codes just as a reference to see what they, because they're extensive, and it looks like a lot of thought has been going into it. And I can tell you that when I looked at our LDRs, it talks about per parcel, and when you look at, in terms of combining for dwelling volume, but when you look at the state specifically uses the terminology contiguous parcels of land. And as Mr. Sloan pointed out, there's a road there. That separates it. It's no longer contiguous. So you can't use the land across the road in order to determine what your volume of dwelling units could be in that one area. Right now, he's really only got 0.9 acres of land. That would limit him to 0.9 times 25 or 0.9 times 15 if it stays MU1.
Well, he claims he has something from some time in the past from the city. I would really like to see what he has.
Yeah, so would I.
15 years ago.
Yep,
Things have
yep.
changed a lot.
That's a fact.
If something like this was approved, what would happen to the adjoining property value?
They would be harmed.
They'd be decreased, of course.
Well,
So you need to
Potentially.
divorce the two. A land use change does not mean you approve the development order.
That's correct.
yeah, that's
They're
right.
two separate beasts.
Land use is a legislative, your development order is not legislative.
Now, you do know that we all have the opportunity here to either vote yes, yes with contingencies, or no. So I would imagine the contingencies would be, we could say something like, okay, all of these things have to be in play in order for our vote to be yes. So you have three options to vote. And then, of course, it goes to the council for definitive vote.
Three-way vote. I think you probably have to craft a motion to include.
No,
The
it's
contingencies.
somewhere in the LDRs. I can't look it up, but it's
Right.
but it's
If you want to make
we-
sure you cover all the contingencies,
yeah,
I would recommend you do that.
yeah. It is. We have one of three options, and so does the council members. They do the same thing. It's I'm using the wrong word, but it's like a contingency. It would be yes, but these things have to occur. So, Anyway, let's move on to the next thing that's on the menu here. Mr. Robichev?
Yep.
Okay, the fun stuff.
Yeah.
I hope everybody printed out a copy of that handout, because I did not print any extra ones. We're talking about the limited manufacturing initiative, for lack of a better term. Just to bring you up to speed, we had discussed this at the last meeting, and per Mr. Sloan's suggestion, I was asked to distill it down to where the entire concept could be covered in the LDR, not in a combination of the comp plan and the LDR. And that's what I attempted to do here. The first aspect of this is, based on some comments that occurred at that meeting, was the definition of manufacturing. The state definition of manufacturing is covered in great detail in the Florida statutes, 163, 3251, paragraph 4, if you're interested. And Florida adopts, by reference, something called the NAICS classification system. This system provides a high degree of granularity by taking more than 440 types of manufacturing to which it assigns individual 6-digit codes. There are over 667,000 individual manufacturing businesses nationwide that are covered by this system. What Florida basically says is, if it falls in NAICS designations 31, 32, or 33, it is manufacturing. What I suggest further down is I don't think we should come up with our own definition of manufacturing. I think we should just adopt the state's definition. Alternatives would be take some of their definitions and not others, but then those definitions constantly change. The NAICS definitions constantly change. We'd be updating the LDR weekly. So basically, let's just accept the state definition by reference and then come up with a new concept called light manufacturing, which we will allow in certain commercial land use districts that is compatible with the desired growth patterns of the CRA and which will serve a legitimate public purpose. So diving into our hymnal, the LDR, if you've got a copy of that available, this is the start of the changes I propose. On page 2-14, we need to change the definition of industrial use.
Where are you at, Jim?
Page 2-14.
2-14, thank you. I'm there.
The definition of industrial use I propose we change to any activity within land areas involving manufacturing as defined in sections 31 through 33 of the North American Industrial Classification System, but not light manufacturing, which is defined below.
In my version, that's 2-13. 2-13.
I printed this from the
Yeah, I was
website.
gonna say, do you have an old one?
Do I?
2-13.
Industrial uses at the.
Industrial use is the last one on page 2-13.
Okay, mine's 1 November 22. What's yours?
Mine too.
One's at
November
the
1.
top of 214.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's at the top.
But
of
No,
it doesn't matter what page it's on, but
Yeah.
it currently reads any activity within land areas predominantly connected to manufacturing, assembly, processing, and storage. That definition doesn't jive with the state definitions. So I'm proposing we change it to any activity with land areas involving manufacturing as defined by the NAICS 31 through 33 standards, but not light manufacturing. Make a distinction there, which is defined below. And page 2- any discussion on that? 2-17. To avoid confusion and keep all manufacturing definitions in one place, we got item 21, which is part of low-intensity commercial, the definition thereof. So to avoid to trying to keep all those definitions in one place, we want to change item 21 to read, inside assembly facilities not defined as manufacturing under the NAICS sectors 31 through 33. Okay, we want to add a new definition. Oh, I'm sorry, after maintenance, we want to add a definition for manufacturing, which would be maintenance.
That's on page 217.
Okay, 217. Okay, you want to. Okay, we want to change the definition, sorry, change the definition of no, we want
So you
to,
want
no,
to
after
add the
maintenance,
definition.
manufacturing stays the same, sorry. No, it doesn't, it changes.
You're adding that definition.
Well, you're right, all right. I'm sorry, yes, it's an added definition, manufacturing. A business engaged in the mechanical, physical, or chemical transformation of materials, substances, or components into new products as defined in, again, referring to the NEICS system, sectors 31 through 33 of the NEICS system. So we're reinforcing that we are using that system. We're gonna add a new definition called light manufacturing, which is gonna be in the L's, which is probably gonna put it somewhere before, be brought somewhere near page 214. In that way, but this will be a new definition called light manufacturing. And here's where we get into the specifics of how we want to control what manufacturing we're going to allow here. We define light manufacturing as a subset of manufacturing for any business which meets all of the following criteria or limitations. Limitation 1, wet or dry processes not generating industrial waste that must be treated before it's released into the Parker sanitary sewer system. That's to prevent us from having the headache of having to support a sanitary sewer system.
Right.
Absolutely.
Limitation 2, processes that emit no obnoxious odors, and this is for you, Chairman.
Thank you.
As described in Florida statutes 386.401, or any odor subject to a complaint as detectable by ASTM E679-19 using the recognition of the nature of the substance threshold method. Now, that kind of testing is really, really expensive.
It is.
And it's hard to find people that do it.
But
So
at least it would be there.
it
So
would
if we
be
had a
there.
complaint, we'd have something to fall back
what
on.
we may want to add may or may not want to add, in this case, it's good, the complainant is gonna have to foot the bill for the testing because the city won't. I don't know if we need to do that, or not.
Well, the applicant for development order would have to prove that it satisfies.
Well, this
or
would be,
doesn't satisfy.
see, this would be the result of, this is after he's operating, we get a complaint that he's stinking up the joint.
I see.
So he's already in operation. So so a citizen comes in and says, I smell cheese, I don't like cheese. So you got,
How
this is the
stinky
test
is
method
cheese?
you have to use to prove that it smells like cheese.
Ah.
And that, all of these definitions may want to be tweaked a little bit just to accommodate the before look for a development application and also an after look.
If that's necessary, yes. I thought I made it clear, but if it needs to be separated, it can be separated.
So they'd have to indicate what kind of cheese they're gonna manufacture.
Well, it's a very, I mean, it's, it involves taking test samples, go out there and capturing air, and you've got these certified noses that you put it in front of, and they do blind, it's,
It is exactly that.
you can't hire a neighborhood bloodhound to do it,
That's right.
because they always lie.
It just ain't that easy cutting the cheese
No,
anymore. is it?
no.
No.
Well, and it is weird, but odors can really screw up a picnic.
Yeah.
So,
Hello, we live by the paper mill, that's a
yes,
given.
Yeah, I hear you, hon.
That's a good point. Okay, so, look at, separating before and after.
Can you take a question or two?
Sure, go ahead. No, this is a discussion. If you guys got any suggestion, I'm open.
Inside assembly, I'm back on page 1, 2, 3. Inside assembly facilities not defined as manufacturing.
Mhm.
Can you give me an example?
I cannot think of an inside assembly facility that is not manufacturing.
Pizza.
I tried. I cannot come up with one. And the problem is that NEICS system is so detailed. I guarantee you give me the name of a business and I'll bet I can find a 6-digit code that covers it.
Okay, good deal.
So,
And then, aside from odors, my other thought was about the ovens, because we had recently attended people who were making pottery.
And that's,
And I see
that's in the next one, yeah.
processes there of.
Not requiring temperatures above
Yeah, I mean, you know,
600.
when people are spinning pottery, we just don't want to have any
Oh,
unintended
gosh, I
consequences.
Just
printed
like-
out the wrong one.
It can be 2,000, it can be.
Yeah, they,
2,200,
usually
the
they
kiln.
kiln dry them
Damn
at
it.
like 2,200 feet.
And the
or
crematorium
2,200
down, the
degrees.
crematorium down
I don't know,
that way,
the one I,
Oh.
they cook at a higher higher
Yes.
temperature.
did the one have you got the one I posted?
This is the one that you sent us.
Okay, does it have, does paragraph 3 have an have another sentence at the end that says, the above notwithstanding?
You know.
Okay,
It
so,
says, oh, wait, notwithstanding the foregoing, all dry processes run at atmospheric pressures regardless
Yes.
of temperature, which meant no waste gases are allowed. Okay.
so that's how you get your glass blowers.
Okay, very good.
And-
Glass blowers and pottery.
Pottery, as long as it's a 1 atmosphere process, you can get as hot as the
Good,
sun.
Good catch there, Jim. Very nice.
Okay.
Very good.
Item 4 is kind of a no-brainer. Its processes not involve certain hazard classes. They are basically explosives, flammable gas, poisonous gas, spontaneous combustibles, oxidizers, poisonous or infectious materials, radioactive materials, corrosive materials, or miscellaneous hazardous materials. That gets the battery manufacturing and recycler out of the
Yeah.
mix. And the last one is just processes that don't make too much noise, 65 dB beyond the property boundary line.
I was gonna ask you about noise, if that was.
Yeah, I just picked that number out of thin air because that's the number we use on the ACUS for building, what is it, trailers? You can't build trailers inside the 65 dB line on the ACUS.
There's also a section in 26-101 under the definition of nuisance that has a definition of what constitutes a nuisance from a noise pollution standard
26101 of what?
of the Parker Code.
Oh, so it's an
The
ordinance?
ordinance
It's
is-
an ordinance, okay.
Yeah, it's in this book.
Would I be able to find it online?
Well, sure you can.
How much time have you got?
I'm sure the clerk has made sure that it is published.
Okay, I'll take a look at that and see if, or just, maybe I could just reference the ordinance, or should I?
You might want to look at that because there's a whole breakdown of noise pollution in
Okay,
26-101.
I wish I'd have known that existed before I wrote this. I'll take a look at that. Okay, want to add another definition, basically tell people what the NEICS system is, and that's what it is. It's basically a private industry standards company,
Very good.
and they start with the 99 OSHA standard industrial classification codes, and they blow it up to thousands and thousands more.
Okay, very good.
Okay, now number 6, we want to reinforce that manufacturing is an allowed conditional use in commercial districts. So on page 4-10, I think I added this because it just didn't say it clearly, and I wanted to make sure that we were unambiguous. So 4-10, can't be right.
Yeah, you want to add a conditional use section in there.
Yeah, that was the whole point, yeah. Okay, so yeah, here are my notes. We have allowable uses, we have to add a conditional use section for light and for light manufacturing. So allowable uses, number 3, the new number 3 is gonna be light manufacturing, and we'll, have all the well, basically just be light manufacturing.
Well, it'll be conditional uses, and under that, you will list light manufacturing.
Ah, yes, okay, yeah, we'll add a new section, conditional uses. One of the conditional uses will be light manufacturing, and then we'll renumber the other sections as required to bump them down a level.
I need to understand that. So each light manufacturing would be defined, predefined?
No,
We
no.
would identify
No,
what it is?
It's an allowable use. So
No,
the first,
conditional use.
I mean, it's conditional use, so you have, this is the conversion, this is the,
General commercial.
general commercial district. We have, general commercial GC, paragraph 2 is allowable uses. We have a bunch of things under allowable uses. We have to add a conditional use paragraph because it doesn't have a conditional use paragraph, and that's
Okay.
we're gonna put light manufacturing as a conditional use. It is defined elsewhere in the definitions. what is light manufacturing. So we're just trying to make the allowable use and conditional use section more complete. It is only allowed in commercial districts, so we need to make it a conditional use because you can't do it in just anywhere.
Let me ask you a question about commercial use. Is it still your intention to segregate out CRA areas?
There is a stipulation under conditional uses, the next paragraph down actually, the new 4.5.4.3, light manufacturing provided that in any sub-area of the CRA, the property must have direct vehicular access to a state or federal road or highway without the use of city or streets for deliveries, including raw materials and finished products. So that's the only
So
caveat.
will we need to change then, the CRA section of the LDRs? Or can we leave them alone and just, use that statement?
Don't know why you'd have to change the the CRA section just, does it, I don't know.
I think it would, we need to take a look at it. It may not require change, but I think from a standpoint of clarification, we may, Mr. Robichaud, you may want to look at providing clarification.
Okay, where we looking, Mark?
This would be under, starting at 4-7.
Yeah, I'm on page 424, but I may not have the newest version. I'm
That
at
is
4-7.2. And that's sub-area 1. We simply define what those areas, those CRA areas will look like.
Right.
Sub-area 1, sub-area 2, sub-area 3.
Oh, well, actually, I do have a pen and ink change there. I included low-intensity commercial in there.
Oh, okay.
And I lined out retail, restaurant, office, and residential, and just said low-intensity commercial, because that includes retail, restaurant, office, and
Right.
residential, plus other things.
So we could add that?
Well, yeah, it's just it's 2 words replacing 4 words. 5
Very
words.
good.
So there would be a change.
Yeah, there would be a change, and I'll make a note of that. 472.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Prohibited uses under general commercial manufacturing, except light manufacturing. You can't do manufacturing unless it's light manufacturing, as defined in the definitions.
Well, here's your 4-7.2.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Yeah, you
Okay.
did put that, number 8.
How about
Yeah,
that? I thought about it.
very good. Sorry, jumped ahead.
Sub-area 1 may include low-intensity commercial. We're not saying you can't do light manufacturing in sub-area 1, 2, or 3. I don't think I said that anywhere. You just, if you're in a,
If we're gonna do it in sub-area 1, it makes sense to do it in 2 and 3, because,
yeah, what's the difference?
Yeah.
The only caveat is if you are in a sub-area, you've got to have direct access to a state road.
State road.
yeah, well, every one of them has state roads right there. So you got the sub-area 1, and then sub-area 2, the commercial, and yeah, you identified, so it'd have to be commercial, and then it could be sub-area 1, sub-area 2, sub-area 3, and the red is your,
You have this up here,
Well,
that is part of the sub-area,
I don't think so.
that doesn't have access.
mm,
If you look at the comp plan map, not the LDR map, the comp plan map.
Well, here's all 3 of them, and that's not even sub-area, it's just long-term.
Mr. Robichaud, look at the comp plan map,
Oh.
not the LDR map.
but Jim, aren't you suggesting that this would only be, light industrial would be commercial?
It can only occur in commercial,
And isn't red commercial?
red
So
is
it-
commercial.
Red's commercial.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've got it, but there is a map at the back of the comp
Oh,
plan.
it's in the very back of the meeting.
Well, here, let me show it to you. Anyway, I'll get with you and show you. There is a
little
part of
spot there
that up
on,
on
the
top
chair.
that is in the sub-area.
Okay. But it doesn't, but it's not commercial according to that,
Correct.
so it wouldn't play because
Correct.
it's not commercial.
I just didn't want you to look at that and say, that doesn't include, that's not a CRA map, in other words.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
there's a bit off on that.
Okay, so,
Kendrick.
that's the end of my, my inputs. Does anybody have any, I mean, the whole idea is, kind of the executive summary is, we want to, except by reference to the state of Florida definition of manufacturing, we want to define a subset of manufacturing, which we call light manufacturing, based on processes and other characteristics. And we want to establish light manufacturing as a conditional use only and only in commercial properties with certain restrictions. So that's the nexus of it.
And, and these restrictions would be input into the LDRs. It looks good, Jim. Thank you for all that great work.
And is there some sort of boilerplate or global statement that needs to be made about it always requires city council approval? Is that a
Well,
wise
no,
thing?
you're talking about making discrete changes to the LDR,
Yes.
which would require,
Well, no, I mean,
that requires an ordinance, first of all. So we have to.
no, once the LDR is changed and published, a developer comes out and he wants to establish a light manufacturing at this address. And
That is a conditional
It's a
use, and it would go through the planning commission and to the city commission,
okay.
because that would be
So they're in- they're
categorized
all-
as a
they-
major
it just-
development.
It wouldn't be an automatic checkoff, you
No.
fill all the squares,
No.
okay.
So do we need to come up with a finalized version and then next month vote on those changes
Yeah,
and
once
where
you-
they go?
Why don't you express what you'd like, Mr. Sloan? You wanted me to.
Well, what I would suggesting to Mr. Robichaux is that you agree conceptually to what he has presented, and then let Mr. Robichaux and myself work out the actual language. I'll need to put it into an ordinance so you all can specifically see it. We'll need to make some tweaks to some of this, and there may be some additional, some other changes to the LDR that need to be made. So,
Very good.
so I'd like to work with Mr. Robichaux. We'll come up with his section, and then I'll put it in the.
Okay, I should be able to get that to you by the end of the week.
Okay.
And that's all I got.
Good deal. Let me move on to the parking piece then. Jim, thank you.
Sure.
That's excellent.
Wonderful
Anybody
job.
else have any thoughts? No? Pass these down if you don't mind, sir. Thank you. Passing that down there. All right, so one of the things that we talked about was parking requirements. So when we go to, for example, we don't have any industrial or light industrial, and when you look at our parking requirements, whether it's residential, whether it's retail or what have you, we have parking requirements. What I did is I just wanted to see what Bay County was doing. So now that we're adding a light manufacturing or light industrial, we may need to go ahead and add a parking requirement for a building that's being built. There's a couple of thoughts that I've got. First of all, they talk about in a commercial manufacturing with industrial establishments not catering to retail trade. In other words, customers would not be driving up to the front door in order to purchase, but they would recommend 2 spaces per 1,000 square foot of floor space. One thought I've got about that is that may be too many spaces, particularly because we're in an environment now where things are being automated. And we may want to adopt that if you feel that that's appropriate, but we also may want to adopt an alternative option based on the number of employees that a light manufacturing facility may have.
That's a movable number, though.
It's a what, sir?
It's a movable number.
Yeah, are you gonna go in and count their employees on a regular basis?
No.
No. I
But-
would suggest you use the county as a basis to start your
You don't or
analysis.
do?
I think you do it based on
You
the
gotta pin
square
it to
feet.
something that doesn't change, like the square
Yeah.
footage.
Like the square footage?
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you a question though. So let's say you've got a 25 or 30,000 square foot light industrial manufacturing facility. That's an awful lot of parking spaces for a facility that may only have 30 employees and doesn't have any retail.
Well, that may be a different story, but the basis for analyzing the number would be the square footage. So you all may decide you want 1.8 spaces or 1.6 or whatever, But the only thing that doesn't move, as Mr. Robichaux said, is the square footage.
Yeah, you may need more granularity on the types of business in the left-hand column
Right.
to accommodate those variables, but you ultimately are gonna, the only thing that.
My concern was the one that is there is maybe too many parking spaces for a new world, where the new world is constantly going to automation.
I
So
yeah,
what
I
are the
understand the
ideas,
dilemma.
what are the ideas about, because I'm not so sure that square footage of the building is where we need to set the number of parking spaces. For example, you know, you may have a warehouse that's 30,000 square feet. And
Well, it's
you
not
don't
manufacturing.
need that kind of parking capacity.
Well, but your warehousing is a different category.
Well, that's just an example.
So let's okay. I can't think of another static parameter that you can use that would. You know, one size does not fit all. I understand that, but
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of, it's very definitive if you've got a grocery store, you know, a movie house with so many seats, you know, a manufacturing facility that also is in retail, an auto repair shop where, you know, you have so much room for making repairs. The problem is the world is changing and we're in an environment now where maybe the standard has to be rethought in terms of how many parking spaces are needed.
well, commercial manufacturing with not carrying a retail trade. So that's somebody that makes something and just ships it out. You know, has an
Yeah.
online presence.
Exactly.
And they're the regional developer or manufacturer of widgets.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very highly automated process, and they can get by with 3 people.
Right,
But their automated process takes 10,000 square feet.
right.
I think your granularity idea is much better to flesh out that kind of operation. You know, currently in the current LDRs, you're just a generic commercial retail business or personal service is 4 spaces per 1,000 feet
Right.
under a generic term. So, you know,
So if you equate that to light industrial, you
like
got a
manufacturing, yeah.
20,000 square foot building, you're looking at 80 spots. It's just
Right.
not, it's not. it's
So
not
we'd have
doable.
to create some granularity there.
What
And-
else could you use, though? I mean,
Well, I think the square footage is correct. You can distinguish between sales to the public that are accessible at the location versus, as you put it, you know, internet kind of sales. So, but I think the square footage is the basis on which you need to do it, and then decide how many spaces you're gonna require. So-
Okay.
So if, Mr. Chair, if you want to come up with some granularity, given the current LDR blanket and then what you've got
What page are
there.
you on the parking?
5-35.
Thank you. 535.
okay, so we don't have industrial. I'd recommend that changes to.
Yeah, obviously, 535 only says business is a category, so,
This is from Bay County or?
Bay County, yeah, Bay County zoning and development codes. It's their current, it's what they use. This is the entire,
Do they have a category of commercial? not-
yeah, I just gave you the one.
Not catering to
the-
retail trade?
I just gave you the one that had the industrial on it. They don't have light industrial. They just have industrial, non-retail business, but they do. I mean, they've got all these other sections here. Dwellings, public assembly, health facilities, banks, food stores, furniture stores, la, la, la. It goes on and on.
well, like I say, Mr. Chair, I think we get a more granular version of this and perhaps create another category under the 535, page 535. that might help. But I do believe, I agree with you, that, that Mr. Robichaux, you may want to consider putting that into all the various changes, because if we add a light manufacturing component, then you need to deal with light manufacturing from a parking.
I had assumed that it would be
standpoint.
covered in other areas. All we're doing is limiting processes, but if it's not
Well,
covered.
if you would categorize it as a retail business, then they'd have to have 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet.
Yeah, exactly. It's,
Is there a reason to depart from those standards?
Mr. Rega is suggesting there is, if it's an internet type sales business and no retail component on site.
I
It's something
think,
to take a look
I think
at,
it's
I think.
wise to, I mean, we could have 2 different standards, light manufacturing with retail, light manufacturing without retail. Without retail, you're not gonna have the parking requirements. You know, it costs a lot of money to put 60 or 80 parking spaces in, a lot. And that may be, you know, that might be a showstopper for certain people. Tell you what, just give it some thought. I'll send the clerk a couple of my ideas and have her send it out to you. How about that? 'Cause
What's triggered all this change, or
we had a
potential change? What's triggered all this?
good question, John. We had a number of light manufacturing companies come to us, and right now, manufacturing isn't anywhere in the LDRs in terms of it being an acceptable thing to do. I think that it probably came about the rewriting of the LDRs. I think when most people think of manufacturing or industrial, they're thinking of dump trucks and gravel trucks and heavy-duty 18-wheeler traffic. But we're a seaside community. And if you go to other seaside communities, there's a lot of small little mom and pop organizations that manufacture things like birdhouses, dowels, you know, pottery,
The
glass
sale
blowing.
place down here, I
And-
mean,
and
technically.
yeah, and manufacturing is really when you bring in a product and change it and then sell it as something different. So it eliminates too many things. So what we decided is we can't be that restrictive. I mean,
this be
we
the
don't,
logical
we didn't
place?
want that to be
Well,
an unintentional consequence.
Would
My
this be the
concern
logical
is
place
if you
to
make
put
it too
light
restrictive, all these
manufacturing
mom and
to
pops
just
are
nip
gonna close up.
toenail it in
and we
there?
have
Absolutely
no mom and
agree.
pop businesses.
Absolutely, and
So,
in fact, that's,
Well, I'm trying to find out what the reason for all this
That's what I read.
change is.
To include
That's what
it
it
so
is.
it doesn't
Parker,
exclude
LDR,
them.
page 535.
Because right now, it kind of does
To add.
technically.
yeah.
If CB Sales up in Paxton moved out and someone else came in and said, well, I wanna make sales, technically they can't.
Under the current rules, they wouldn't. And you know, that's a perfect seaside manufacturing facility, make sales.
Yeah.
And right now, the LDRs don't allow for it, so it's too restrictive. And we didn't intend that. That was a oversight and an unintended consequence that we need to fix. But- Well.
I didn't mean to run everybody out of
Well, John, welcome to the team.
Thank you.
Kim, welcome as our new clerk. Thanks for everybody's
Yay, I know, right?
outstanding.
It wasn't
We
me,
ran
that was
everybody.
Mr.
Look at
Robichaux
these two
here.
people. Thank you for staying and thank you for continuing.
Thanks for hanging
Yay!
it out.
Meeting's
Sticky
over.
cheese, whatever.
Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
Alright.
Mr. Sloan, I'll send the clerk some additional ideas about how we might differentiate between the two, retail and non-retail. Something tells me there's gotta be another threshold other than square footage of the building, because there's a lot of large buildings that don't have any traffic for
Can I
parking.
get on
You
Municode
know-
and see what's